Over the next few weeks, we're reading about the story of Yaakov, Esau, and then Yosef. So we're reading about Jacob, Esau, all these people, and we want to understand what's going on. There's a lot of very interesting questions. The life of Yaakov is enigmatic, and there's many puzzles and mysteries. So we want to try to address as much as we can today, cover like 3 or 4 parshas in one class. So we want to talk about, first of all, why were Yaakov and Esau born as twins? What was the whole point of having twins, Yaakov and Esau? That's number one. The second thing, why did Esau go off the derech? Why did he become this wicked child? What happened to Esau? And why did Yaakov buy Esau's birthright, his bechorah? What does that even mean, to buy a birthright? How does that work? What was the point of that? And then, why was Yaakov tricked into marrying Leah? You remember the story? He wanted Rachel. He really wanted to marry Rachel. But somehow, after working for 7 years, he got tricked into marrying Leah. And how did that even work? What, he didn't know the difference? Like, how do you marry the wrong person and not realize it? And finally, and most importantly, why was he renamed? Why was he renamed Israel? And what does that mean to be Israel? What does it mean for us to be children of Israel, Bnei Israel? What does it mean for the state of Israel, that it's called Israel and not something else? So these are all the questions that we want to address. So we're going to go right into it and see how far we can get. We're going to read from the Torah. So it says like this. This was in last week's parsha. It says how Yaakov and Esau were born. Vayetzeh Rishon Admoni. So we remember Rivka was pregnant. Yitzhak and Rivka didn't have kids for 20 years. And finally they prayed together and God answered their prayers. And she was pregnant and she felt something strange in her belly. And she was told that there would be twins, that she's carrying twins that will be the fathers of different nations. And so finally she gives birth. And the first one, Arishon, was Admoni, was red. Okay? Kulo ka'aderet se'ar. And he was very hairy. He was covered, I guess he was Bukharian, I don't know. But he was very hairy, covered in red hair all over his body. Veikra'u shmo Esav. So they called him Esav because Esav means like he was complete. He was fully made. He was well done. That's what Esav means, right? Like asui. He was like done. Lasot, like from that word. And yeah. Ve'achreichen, and right after, Yatza Achiv. And then his brother came out, Ve'yado ochezet ba'akev Esav, and he was holding onto the heel of Esav, Ve'ikra shmo Yaakov, and so they called him Yaakov, which means like the heel. So one was complete, and one was like the heel. Ve'itzhak ben shishim shana beledadutam, okay, and Yitzhak was 60 years old. He got married when he was 40, 20 years, they couldn't have kids, so he's 60 years old when they were born. And then the Torah continues to tell us, Ve'igdelu ha'na'arim, and the youths grew, Ve'i Esav ish yodeh tzayid, and Esav became a hunter, ish sadeh, he was a man of the field. And Ve'Yaakov ish tam, but Yaakov was this like innocent boy, yoshev oalim, sitting in tents. So he was always sitting in tents. What does that mean? So from this already, we see in this verse their whole destiny. What is their essence, who they are. Each one was given a blessing, was given certain talents and skills and powers to guide them in a certain direction, to help them fulfill their mission in life. Esau was this like strong physical man. From birth, he was already muscular and hairy and well made. So you have this strong and dominant Esau, a hunter, a man of the field. And you have Yaakov, who is a spiritual person. He's sitting in tents, he's humble, he's innocent, he's tam, he's quiet, he's learning, he's studying, he's praying. These two different people. And so that brings us back to, what is the purpose of these two boys? Like, why do we need a Yaakov and an Esau? Why are they even born? Why do we need an Yitzhak? Why do we need an Avraham? What is the purpose of the whole nation? What is the purpose of the Jewish people? Why did God choose Avraham? What was this idea of being chosen? What did he choose him for? And we read earlier in chapter 18 that ki yeda'ativ, God is saying that I know that leman asher yitzaveh et banav, he will instruct his children, ve'et beito, and his household, acharav, after him, ve'shamru derech Hashem, and they will follow, the path of God, they will walk in God's ways, la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat, to do righteousness and justice. That was the point of Abraham. So in the very immoral world, full of idolatry and injustice, God chose Abraham to bring justice and righteousness into the world. And God says, I know that he is the one that's going to carry on this message, pass it on to his children and to all of his descendants after him, to follow in the path of God, to walk in God's ways, to fulfill God's law, and to spread justice and righteousness in the world. That's what he was chosen for. And so now we have Yaakov and Esau. That mission passed on from Abraham to Yitzchak, and from Yitzchak to his children. And now you have twins. So you have Yaakov and Esau, and each one is meant to take on that mission, right? That same mission that Abraham had, which was to make the world a better place, essentially, and more specifically, to actually restore it to be that perfect world that God intended. God created a Garden of Eden, right? The Garden of Eden was here. It wasn't in heaven somewhere. Gan Eden was here. Adam and Eve were here, and God created this perfect world, but that world was corrupted and ruined. And Abraham's mission was to recreate a more perfect world, to make it like Eden. And there's a very interesting allusion to that, because there's a very special word that the Torah uses. It only appears 3 times in the whole Torah. And that word is va'ita. Va'ita is first used when God planted. It literally means like to plant, that God planted the Garden of Eden. So at the very beginning of the Torah, we read, Va'ita Hashem Elohim gan be'eden, that God planted a garden in Eden. That's the word that's used, va'ita. That same unique word is used, the next time we see it used is after the destruction of the flood, after the great flood, when Noah comes off the ark and he starts rebuilding this new world. And again, it says, Vayachel Noach ish adama ve'ita karem, that Noah planted a vineyard. So like one of his first acts when he started to rebuild the world was to plant a vineyard. So again, the Torah uses this special word, va'ita. So there's a connection made right away. God originally made this perfect world, this Garden of Eden, and the verb that's used is va'ita. The world was corrupted. God hit refresh, reset the whole world, start again with Noah. And again, the first thing that we see, the first verb there, is that Noah is planting va'ita, a vineyard. And guess where the third time that word appears? The third and last time that it appears in the Torah is with Abraham. What's the pasuk? We all know this pasuk. Va'ita eshel biver sheva, right? That biver sheva. That Abraham planted an eshel tree, whatever that means, some kind of special tree, the identity of which is subject to some discussion. But he planted va'ita eshel in Be'er Sheva. So the same word is used just 3 times in the whole Torah. We know it's a very unique word. The Garden of Eden, Noah, and Abraham. And that's very clear. The world was destroyed. Noah tried to rebuild it. It was corrupted again. And now Abraham comes to rebuild it. The same Va'ita. And it appears just one more time, Va'ita, in the Tanakh, at the end, in Sefer Daniel, in the book of Daniel, when he's talking about basically Gog and Magog and the final war at the end of days. And again, the word Va'ita is used over there to allude to the fact that eventually we will finally have this perfect Eden after all the wars and things like that. So that's an allusion to Abraham's mission a little more deeply, this key word Va'ita, that Abraham's job was to restore Eden. And now Yaakov and Esau inherit that mission. And each was given their own unique task. Because there's 2 ways that you have to fix the world. To bring justice to the world, tzedakah u'mishpat, righteousness and justice, there's 2 ways to do that. The Yaakov way is to be a scholar and a teacher, an educator, to go out there and to talk to people. That's the tam approach, the very soft and innocent approach. To teach goodness, to bring light into the world. But that doesn't always work, because not everybody hears that message, right? Hamas is not going to accept that message. So sometimes you have to fight also. You also need an Esau to defeat evil. So on the one hand, you need to bring light into the world. On the other hand, you have to fight evil and dispel darkness. These are 2 different things, 2 different tasks. So Yaakov was given the blessings and all the talents and skills to be a great educator and a scholar and a spiritual person who's going to teach people about all the good stuff, to teach people about tzedakah and mishpat. But then you also need an Esau, for those who won't take the message and for those who insist on being evil and wicked and murderous and so on. For those, you need Esau. For those, you just have to eliminate them because there's no other way. You try nice, but when they don't get it, after many attempts, ultimately, you need to get rid of these people and those ideas and the people and the ideology that's behind it. So that was Esau, who was given this physical strength to defeat evil. Okay, so that's the mission of each one. Make sense? Okay, good. So that was what their purpose was. Yaakov's mission is the teacher, the scholar, the one who spreads godliness. Esau's mission is the one who is the warrior, who's going to defeat the evil. He's going to fight what's known in Kabbalistic text as the Sitra Achra, to fight the side of evil, to kill all the terrorists. That's his job. That's Esau. And they were supposed to work together. That's why they're twins. These two twins were born. They were meant to work together and help each other and together accomplish this mission that started with Abraham to repair the world. Unfortunately, you can use those blessings and gifts and talents that you're given from God for everybody. This is true for everyone. You can use those talents in a good way, and you can use those same talents in a bad way. And so we see that Esau wasn't able to really channel that energy in the right direction. So he was given this great physical strength and perhaps physical desire, but he wasn't able to conquer it. And instead of using it for the good, he started using it to commit all kinds of sins. That was Esau. Yaakov also, by the way, wasn't so perfect. We see that he made certain errors as well. He used his higher intellect and his wit to, trick people and things, and we'll get to that. And so Yaakov also misused, in some cases, his great power that he was given. But Esau took it to a very negative direction where he became a sinner. And Yaakov recognized that very quickly, that he's not going to be able to work with Esau. And so did his mother. Rivka also knew very quickly. How quickly? At what age did Yaakov already know that Esau is not going to fulfill his mission? Somewhere there. So we know from the Torah that, we don't know the exact year, but the next event in the story is, of course, that Yaakov is cooking this red stew. Right? So the Torah says, "Vayazed Yaakov nazid," that Yaakov was making this stew. "Vayavo Esav min hasadeh vehu ayef," that Esav came from the field. Again, he's always out in the field, and he is tired. What is he tired from? According to rabbinic tradition, all kinds of sins. Yaakov is making a stew. Now, why is he making a stew? What kind of stew is he making? It was a lentil soup, a lentil stew, and traditionally, the lentil stew was made because of? For mourning purposes. So somebody had passed away, and Yaakov was making a lentil soup. The lentils, the round lentils, are supposed to represent the circle of life. So that's why there's a tradition to have a lentil stew in a morning meal. And so who was the person that passed away? It was Abraham. So according to the rabbinic tradition that fills in the details, the Torah doesn't say this explicitly, but we know that Abraham had passed away, and Yaakov was cooking this lentil stew. And so if you put together the chronology, how old was Abraham when he passed away? He was 175, right? The Torah tells us he was 175, which means how old was Yitzhak when Abraham passed away? Abraham had Yitzhak when he was 100 years old, which means Yitzhak was 75 at this point. And we just read that Yitzhak was 60 years old when Yaakov and Esau were born, which means, which means that Yaakov and Esau were 15. So when Abraham died, Yaakov and Esau were 15, which means that for 15 years, the three forefathers' lives overlapped. Right? The Avot, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov lived simultaneously for a 15-year period. So Yaakov is 15, Abraham just passed away, and Esau, instead of being involved in the Shiva in the morning, and the funeral perhaps, he's nowhere to be seen. And he's coming from the field, and he is tired. And Yaakov realizes that, he's not interested. He's not interested in Abraham's mission. Abraham has just passed away, and he's not even here to participate. So clearly he doesn't care about that mission of Abraham. Vayomer Esav el Yaakov, continues, Esav told Yaakov, Aliteni na min ha'adom hazeh. Give me some of this red stuff, this red lentil stew that you have. Ki ayef anuchi, because I am tired. Al ken kara shmo Edom. And that's why we know Esau was also called Edom. Right? Esau also gets a name change. Esau is called Edom because of that red stew that he sold his birthright for. And Edom is the region of Edom is in the south of Israel, like the Negev, south of the Negev, like Eilat basically, like just north of Eilat, that area. And so that's Edom. The Romans called that province Idumea. Idumea is Edom. King Herod, if you remember King Herod 2,000 years ago, one of the last kings of Israel, he was an Idumean. His family were converts, Edomites really. They were descendants of Edom that had converted to Judaism in the time of the Maccabees. And then Herod went on to become this wicked king. He persecuted a lot of Jews. He killed lots of people, killed lots of rabbis. And then he felt bad for it, as the story goes. And then so he decided to make up for it, and he didn't know what to do. So one of the rabbis, one of the survivors, suggested to him to rebuild the temple, the second temple, which was falling into disrepair. And so Herod rebuilt it and made it, this magnificent large building. And the Talmud says that if you haven't seen the temple, the Herod's temple, you haven't seen, a beautiful building. You don't know what's nice architecture if you haven't, because Herod really invested in the temple. So Herod was an Idumean, which really means he was an Edomite that had converted to Judaism. His family had converted to Judaism. So that's Edom. Edom is Esau. And then, Vayomer Yaakov, so Yaakov says, okay, I'll give you this soup. Aval, first, what do you have to do? Micha chayom et bechoratcha. So sell me your birthright. And what is this birthright? What does that mean, sell me your birthright? What is this bechorah? What is it supposed to come with? What is the point of it? So it does have the same letters as bracha, really. It's an anagram of the word for the blessing. Bechorah and bracha are anagrams of each other. That's true. And that justifies him taking the blessing afterwards. We'll get to that. But Bechorah really means his mission, like that mission that he inherited from Abraham to repair the world physically and everything that comes with that. All the promises that come with being a part of the covenant, including the blessings, the land, and everything else, the inheritance that would come with that firstborn status. So Yaakov said, give me your Bechorah. Vayomer Esav, ina anochi olech lamut. I'm going to die anyways. Belama zeli Bechorah. So why do I care about this birthright? I don't care about it. I'm going to die anyways. Vayomer Yaakov, hishava li kayom. So swear to me today. And he swore to him, veishava lo veimkor et bechorato leYaakov. So he sold his birthright. VeYaakov natan leEsav lechem. And Yaakov, this is fun. I just realized that it says Yaakov Natan. That's my two boys. My sons are Yaakov and Natan. So this is good. Yaakov. It just hit me now. Okay. You see, every time you read it, you see something. Maybe I'll find my daughter here. Unzid adashim veyochal vayesht veyakom veyilach veyevez Esav et habechorah. So Esau took his food and spurned the birthright. He didn't care about it, and Yaakov got it. Now, Yaakov buys essentially Esav's whole mission, his whole being, his whole purpose, his inheritance, everything. But the big question is, can he actually do it? Like, can Yaakov be an Esav? Because remember, Esav needs to fight. Like, the fact that Esav sold his birthright doesn't make all the evil go away. Somebody still has to fight the evil.
Are you allowed to sell the birthright?
Apparently. He just did. So that's the question. Can he actually be Esav? Yaakov now bought Esav's mission to be a fighter and a warrior and to confront evil. But can he do it? Because he's an Ishtam Yoshev Oalim. So far, he's just always sitting, learning. He's like this very innocent yeshiva kid. And now God actually puts him to that test. God says, okay, you want to be Esav, you want to take it upon yourself, prove it. And from here on in, you see Yaakov is always put into conflict with various people. God is putting him to the test. And remember, the test is not for God. That's important to remember. Every time the Torah says that God is testing somebody, like Avraham or whoever it is, God doesn't need the test. It's not for God. The test is really for the person. Just like a teacher gives a test to the student, it's not really for the teacher. The teacher doesn't need the test. Right? The test is for the student to figure out where they are and if they can do it and what they need to do to learn more, what they need to work on, where they need to improve. So now Yaakov is being put to the test to see if he can actually be an Esav and fulfill that role. And so Yaakov inherits everything, takes on everything that Esav was supposed to get including his blessing. Yaakov had a blessing designated for him. Esau had a blessing designated for him. And when you look at the two blessings that Yitzhak gives them, you see it very clear. Esau's blessing, the text of Esau's blessing is as we would expect. It's very physical, very all about fighting, war, subjugation. And Yaakov's blessing is very spiritual. It's very godly. It's all about mitzvahs and things like that. And Yaakov now wants to take Esau's blessing. The problem is that Yitzhak is blind to all of this. Literally blind. The Torah tells us that he is blind. The Torah says, "Ve'i ki zaken Yitzhak." Yitzhak got old. "V'ticha'ena einav mireot." His eyes stopped seeing. So why is the Torah telling us that Yitzhak is blind? Remember that there's like multiple layers of meaning here. It's not just that he's physically blind. The Torah is also really telling us that he is blind from the reality that Esau is gone off the derech and doesn't care. The Torah is telling us that Yitzhak still loves Esau. He still almost favors Esau. Rivka is favoring Yaakov, but Yitzhak is favoring Esau. And the Torah is telling us that he's blind to the reality. He's not looking at the sins of his own son. He fails to recognize it. And he still wants to give him the blessing. He doesn't realize that he doesn't deserve the blessing. And even the word mereot, it says, "V'ticha'ena einav mireot," that his eyes were no longer good at seeing. But mereot could also be read miraot, like from the evil things. If you change the aleph to an ayin, he was blind from seeing all the evil things that Esau was doing.
Living in denial.
Yeah, in denial also. And that's understandable. A father loves his son and wants to see the best in him, and he still held hopes. He thought maybe he'll do tshuva. After all, Yitzhak's brother Ishmael did do tshuva. We know that Ishmael was a really bad kid, and he was expelled with his mom, Hagar. But our sages tell us that Ishmael did do tshuva. We see in the Torah that Ishmael came back, he buried Avraham, and over there it says, Vayigva veyamot. And our sages say, Vayigva, the word Vayigva, like he passed on, is only used with tzaddikim. And from this we learn that Ishmael also repented, that he died a tzaddik, Ishmael. So although he was wicked for a very long time, ultimately he repented. So Yitzhak saw that, hey, Ishmael was a bad kid, but he did tshuva and became a tzaddik. So why not Esau? There's still hope. But Rivka and Yaakov realized that there's no hope already. Like they understood that it's too late.
One thing I don't understand is Yitzhak with his chokhmah and binah, his grandeur, when he gave the beracha to Yaakov, and Esau came after. As a father, I think you can put everything aside. You don't have to put like more fire to say, like, Esau, you know what? Oh my gosh, your brother just came and he stole your bracha,
Right. Well, Chazal answers that question because they say what happened when Yaakov was there, it smelled like the Garden of Eden. And he said that he smelled something special. So, and then when Yaakov left and Esau came, they say that it's like he smelled Gehenom. So he knew that what happened was meant to happen, and the person who got the blessing deserved the blessing. Gam baruch yeh. Like, whatever happened, yes, I was tricked into it, but this is how it should have happened. So he realized then it was all as meant to be. Yeah, it was all orchestrated, but it was the right thing to do. So he did realize that at the end. Anyway, we know the story that Rivka actually masterminded this. She said, okay, let's take the goat and we'll put the goat skin on your hands because you're not hairy and he's hairy. So you have to pretend, how are we going to make you look like Esau? So we know what happened. And then he gets the blessing. And again, when you read the text of the blessing, the Esau blessing that Yaakov took, it goes like this: Ve'iten lecha ha'elohim mital ha'shamayim u'mishmanei ha'aretz. May you have all this like material blessing, ve'rov dagan v'tirosh, all the grains and all this wines and things like that. Ya'avducha amim. So nations will serve you. Ve'ishtachavu lecha le'omim, and nations will bow down to you. Hevei gvir le'achecha, you will be this great gibor. You will be really strong. Ve'ishtachavu lecha b'nei imecha, and all your relatives will bow down to you. So it's all very physical. The whole blessing is very materialistic. Yitzhak knew what the mission of each child was, and he prepared a blessing that was fitting for each one. So Esau's blessing is very physical. And we'll see Yaakov's blessing later is not like that at all. Now, what's interesting here is when Esau comes and he finds out what happened, listen to what he says. He says, Vayomer, Achi kara shmo Yaakov, is it because his name is Yaakov, ve'ya'akveni ze pa'amayim, that he was able to trick me twice? Because he's Yaakov, Ya'akveni, that he was able to deceive me, supplant me these 2 times. I think that's what you want. Yeah, like come instead of me, whatever it is, deceive me, come instead of me, because his name is Yaakov. So there's this association with the name Yaakov with being able to outwit somebody. He's this witty guy. And Esau is saying, is it because he's called Yaakov that he's able to outwit me these 2 times? So there's a play on words there. Because he's Yaakov, Ya'akveni, he was been able to outwit me these 2 times. First he took my bechora, et bechorati lakach, vehine ata lakach birchati, and now he also took my blessing. And then, of course, it's a very sad thing when you read this, that Esau starts crying and saying, like, Dad, don't you have a bracha for me? Like, I want a bracha too. Give me something. It's very sad. So, don't you have a blessing for me? And Yitzhak says, no. Like, it's all sad, but he got, the right person got the blessing because he realized that he wasn't worthy of the blessing. And then we know Esau resolves that he's going to kill Yaakov. And so Rivka says, you have to get out of here. Esau's going to kill you. And go to Laban, to my uncle. And you can also get married there because your shidduch is there. And we're going to see why in a moment. Rivka is telling him to flee. But before you go, they went to Yitzhak. And then Yitzhak again blessed him, gave him the actual blessing that was for him. So now, and listen to this blessing. Ve'el Shaddai yevarech otcha. That God will bless you, right? That didn't appear, this exact wording there was no mention of El Shaddai, And ve'ivrecha v'irbecha ve'ita lekahal amim. And you will be a big gathering of nations. So kahal also implies something, in English they translate it as ecclesiastical, where it's like a gathering to learn, like Kohelet, like King Solomon was called Kohelet, that he would gather people to teach people, right? Like Hakel, that it's you gather people to teach them. So he's saying you'll be lekahal amim. It's implying, again, this mission of bringing light and educating the world. Veiten lecha et birkat Avraham. And that's something that was missing with Esau, right? That Yaakov is going to get that mission of bringing the light into the world from Avraham, ulezarecha, and to your offspring after you. The blessing for Yaakov is, again, a lot more spiritual and has nothing to do with people subduing nations, being gibor, fighting, that people are going to bow down to you. It doesn't say that, okay? And so he gets the blessing and he goes to Haran. He goes to Haran, to his uncle Laban, to Rivka's brother. And on the way, that's this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha begins, on the way he gets a vision of this ladder going to the heavens. So we'll leave that aside for another time, but he sees a vision of the ladder and then he heads over to Haran. And how long did this journey take? In the Torah, it seems like it happened like overnight, that he left from here and he ended up in Haran. But according to rabbinic tradition, 14 years. It was actually, there was a 14-year gap between the blessing and when he ran away from Israel and until he arrived in Haran was 14 years. And it has to be that way because if you actually do the chronology, when you add it all up, if you don't say that, then you're missing like 14 years. Because we know that he was with Lavan for 20 years, as it says, and that's when his sons were born. And then you actually know all the years, because then Yosef was 17 when he was sold, and then Yaakov was 130 when he came to Egypt. So if you put together all the numbers, you will see that you're going to be missing 14 years between the blessing and Haran. So what did he do during those 14 years? Where was he? Study. So the tradition is that he went to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. He was still Yoshev Ohalim. So he's running away. He was supposed to become a fighter, right? 63 apparently, right? When he got the blessing and he left, yeah. Yeah. But back then 63 was very young. I mean, he lived 147 years. So he was not even halfway through his life. So he studied in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. We know Shem, the son of Noach, established an academy, one of the first academies, with one of his descendants, Ever. And so they had a yeshiva. Avraham had also been there. Yitzhak had been there at some point. So now Yaakov also went and spent 14 years learning there first. And then he came to Haran. So we see that he runs away and he's still sitting in tent studying. He has not yet proven that he can fight. If he was a real fighter, he would have already confronted Esau. back then. He wouldn't have let Esau chase him away. Syria, basically. Some people say it's in Turkey, maybe southeastern Turkey somewhere, or probably Syria. The consensus that it's in Syria. So not too far away. So he arrives there. We know the story. He sees the well. He sees Rachel. It's love at first sight. And then he wants to marry her. And Lavan says, work for me for 7 years first, then you can marry her. It says, Lavan shtei banot. We know that Lavan had 2 daughters. Shema gdola Leah. The older one is Leah. V'shema ktana Rachel. And the younger one is Rachel. But we're going to have to define exactly what that means, older and younger. Ve'enei Leah rakot. Leah's eyes were very weak, soft. She had soft eyes, whatever that means. Ve'Rachel hayta yafat toar ve'yafat mareh. And Rachel is beautiful. So Rachel is very pretty. Leah doesn't say she's not pretty. It just says she has soft eyes, whatever that means. And then, Seder Olam says this. Are they actually an older sister and a younger sister? Because here, when you read this, it makes it seem like Leah is the older sister and Rachel is the younger sister. But then, we have a question. If that's the case, how did Yaakov not tell them apart on his wedding day? So Seder Olam actually says that they were twins. Nimtzeu Rachel veLeah nas'u benot kaf bet. They were both 22 years old when they got married. And she'ayu te'omot. They were twins. So even though it says one was older, one was younger, it's the same as Esau being older and Yaakov being younger. Meaning Esau and Yaakov were twins, older and younger twin, and Leah and Rachel were also twins. Not identical twins, just like Esau and Yaakov weren't identical twins, but still twins and close enough in appearance that Yaakov couldn't necessarily tell them apart on his wedding day. So they were actually twins, and they were both got married when they were 22 years old. That's what Seder Olam. Seder Olam is the book of chronology that tells us all the years and all the ages of everybody. So,
if he worked for one for 7 years and then had to wait another.
No. So let's clarify that. When he,
7 days later.
Yeah. So he married them. He did. Some people think that he worked 7 years for Rachel and then and married Leah and then had to work another 7 years for Rachel. That's not what happened, because the Torah says like this: Maleh shavua zot v'nitna lecha gam et zot be'avoda asher tavod imadi od 7 shanim acherot. So Lavan told him, okay, just keep her, and then next week we'll have another wedding, and then you'll work for me later another 7 years going forward. Like I'm going to loan her to you kind of thing. And then you're going to work it off for another 7 years. So he actually married them 1 week apart, which is also one of the sources for doing a Sheva Brachot. The reason that we have a wedding party for 1 week and we do Sheva Brachot is actually from here. Because Lavan told him, okay, let's finish the Sheva Brachot for Leah, and then you get married again to Rachel. Going back to that verse that says, if they're twins, they're not identical twins, but they're both very beautiful. But Einei Leah Rakot, she had very soft eyes. The Midrash Tanchuma actually says that they were both equally beautiful. But Leah had soft eyes. So what does that actually mean, that she had soft eyes? She's crying a lot. So Rashi famously says, Sha'ayta svura la'alot begoralo shel Esav ubocha. Her eyes were soft because she was crying so much, because she knew that she was supposed to marry Esav. So what happened? Yaakov and Esav were born, twins. And over there, their cousins in Haran, same thing, Leah and Rachel were born. So right away they did a shidduch. Okay, so Esau, the older twin, will marry Leah, the older twin. Yaakov, the younger twin, will marry Rachel, the younger twin. So that was already destined from their births. And Leah knew that. And Leah got the news somehow that Esau was wicked, probably from Facebook or social media or something. She saw all his social media posts, and she's like, how am I going to marry this guy? No way. So she started crying. And again, according to Kabbalistic sources, she was able to actually do so much crying and praying and meditating and whatever she did, that she was actually able to change her fate. And she was able to marry, in the heavens, that decree had to be changed so that she could also marry Yaakov. And various Kabbalistic texts say that she was able to ascend all the way up to the place of God's throne where his divine light is. And if you remember last year, we talked about the Or HaGanuz, the original divine light of creation, which shone for 36 hours only at the beginning of time. And then after 36 hours, God hid it under his throne. So Leah reached such a high level that she was able to access that divine light all the way up to God's throne so that her decree could be completely changed. And there's a beautiful gematria there because the divine light is 36 hours. We said how that 36 represents the Ol HaGanuz, the divine light, and the gematria of Leah, Lamed Aleph Hey, is 31 and 5 is 36. So it's actually in her name that Leah is 36. So she was on a very, very high level. And if you read the Arizal, the Kitvei HaArizal, she's always described as being on the higher rung. So that's Leah. So she was able to actually change her own fate. Okay, and now, so we understand why Yaakov didn't realize that he was marrying Leah. First of all, because they were twins, they looked very much alike, but also because it was part of God's plan. Again, it's not that Lavan tricked him. Lavan did trick him, but it was meant to be. It came from heaven that Leah actually earned it, and she had kind of changed her own fate to allow her to marry Yaakov. And Rachel, where is she in all of this? Rachel, the Talmud famously says in Bava Batra that Rachel actually gave Leah the signs, right? Like she was part of this whole thing that Rachel wanted. No, before the Dudaim, that they knew on their wedding night that Yaakov and Rachel had discussed it. They even thought that maybe Lavan will try to trick him and put Leah instead. So Yaakov and Rachel gave each other signs of how he would know that she's the right one. And Rachel told the signs to Leah because she was okay with it and whatever. And although the Torah seems to suggest that Yaakov hated Leah, the Midrash actually says he didn't actually hate her. It says he did love her. Ve'yavo gam el Rachel. So what is the meaning of this pasuk that it says ve'yavo gam el Rachel? That Yaakov also came to Rachel. Lelamdecha shebetchila haya ohev et Leah. That Yaakov did actually love Leah. It's not like he only loved Rachel and he didn't like Leah. He did love them both. But the thing is that he got mad at Leah. Why? Because mitoch dvareya, because she told him something. She made a remark that got him really upset. Because when he told her, like, how did you play along in all this? And like, why didn't you tell me about it? Whatever. She said, Amra lo, avicha lo haya omer lecha ata ze bni Esav? Didn't your father ask you, are you Esav? And you said, yes, I am Esav. So you tricked your father, right? So why are you accusing me of, exactly. She said it's midah keneged midah, right? What happened to you is exactly what you did to your own father. You tricked your father by pretending to be somebody else. By pretending to be your twin, and I did the same thing. Yeah, I pretended to be my twin. So then he got really mad at her. So after that, it's like, that turned him off. But originally, he loved them both equally. So Yaakov gets a measure for measure. We said earlier that Yaakov also used his trickery and his intellect to outwit Esau. Maybe there was a better way to do it, and to outwit his own father. He tricked really his father. So he got midah keneged midah. It's almost like a punishment or an exact measure for measure what happened to him, karma, exactly what he did. He ended up working for Lavan for 20 years, and he says that over those 20 years, Lavan tricked him aseret monim, 10 times. He tricked him 10 times. And 10, that the Zohar says, what does that mean that he tricked him 10 times? The Torah actually lists 10 types of sorcery and witchcraft. In Sefer Devarim, there's a list of 10 forbidden acts of witchcraft and sorcery. So it's kosem, me'onen, menachesh, mechashev, chover chaver. There's 10 different types. Shoel ov, yidoni, doresh metim. There's 10 types of forbidden black magic, witchcraft, sorcery. And the Zohar says that when Yaakov says, you tricked me, you abused me 10 times, aseret monim, it means that Lavan was a sorcerer. He was a big sorcerer, and he knew all 10 types of witchcraft, wizardry, black magic, and he was actually doing all kinds of things to Yaakov over all of those years. And what happens next? After 20 years, Yaakov actually runs away. When Lavan is out several days away shepherding, Veignov Yaakov et lev Lavan. So again, he kind of tricked him. Igno, like he stole his heart. Lavan ha'arami, al bli egid lo. He didn't tell him, ki boreach hu, and he fled. He ran away. And again, what did we say? Yaakov's whole mission, his whole test is, are you going to be a fighter? Are you going to be strong? Or are you going to keep being this like ish tam yoshevo alim all the time? Can you be tough? Can you fight? And again, he's running away. Instead of confronting Laban, he's quietly runs away with everything he has when Laban is out of the house.
So he left with Leah.
Yeah, everybody. He took everything and he just ran away. So again, he's failing to confront his oppressors. What's that? He had 20 years to do it. But he didn't, over those 20 years, at no point did he actually try to fight him and...
First, stood up to him, basically.
Exactly. So again, he's running away. And then Laban finds out and he pursues Yaakov. And when he asks him, why did you run away? Like, you could have told me. And Yaakov says, Vaya'an Yaakov, Vayomer leLavan, ki yareti, because I was scared. So he's still, like, not able to fight. You know, he's still afraid. And then Lavan starts, interrogating him. He's looking for his terafim, remember that Rachel took, and he starts going through all the stuff. And finally, it's here at this point that Yaakov realizes that he can't keep running away anymore. He has to start fighting. He has to show some strength. He has to be Esau. And here it says, Vayichar leYaakov. Finally, he gets angry. And Vayarev beLavan. And he actually fights him. So now, after all these years, Yaakov is learning to fight, to stop running away. So he fights him. And then after this, they actually come to a peace agreement, and Lavan promises never to bother him anymore, right? And they make a pact, and they put up a bunch of stones and do this gal-ed, like a witness stone, and Lavan is finally subdued. For all these years he's been running away, and now he finally fights him and is able to actually subdue Lavan, and then they make a peace agreement, and Lavan leaves, never to be heard from again. So Yaakov is slowly starting to become the fighter that he's supposed to be. And right after this, what's the next story that follows? Right, this next week's parsha in Vaishlach, that he is now coming back to Israel. And what's happening? And now Esau, he gets a report that Esau is coming at him with 400 soldiers, like ready for a fight. And at night, he's left alone. He gets ready for the conflict. He's trying to appease him. He's sending messengers, whatever. And then at night, he's left all alone. And what does it say? He fights. At night, he's left alone, and he fights what we think is an angel. But this is what it says. Vayivater Yaakov levado, that Yaakov was left alone. Vayavek ishimo, and a man wrestled with him. So really, it says ish. It says ish. We know that it was an angel, but let's see. Because it really doesn't say angel here. It says that he fought with a man. Ish. Ad alot hashachar, until dawn. Vayar ki lo yacholo, and that person saw that he wasn't able to overcome Yaakov. Vayiga bekaf yerecho, and we know the story. He punched him in the thigh and gave him whatever it was, a Charlie horse. And so Yaakov was then limping, and that's why we don't eat the gida nasheh until today. That nerve, whatever it is, the sciatic nerve in the thigh, which is one of the largest nerves in the body, we don't eat that nerve. So it has to be removed from beef and other whatever animals. So he punches him, but he's still not able to subdue him. Yaakov is holding him down. And so this man, angel, whoever this is, this mysterious figure, says, Vayomer shalcheni, send me, let me go, ki ala shachar, because dawn, the sun is rising, let me go. Okay, why should that matter? There's a question that who cares that dawn is rising? What? Maybe he's a vampire? Okay. Vayomer, and he told him, Lo ashlachecha, I'm not going to let you go. Ki'im berchatani, unless you give me a blessing. Okay. Vayomer elav, and he told him, Mashmecha, what is your name? And he said, Vayomer Yaakov. And this person, this mysterious figure says, Vayomer lo Yaakov ya'amer od shimcha, your name will no longer be Yaakov, Ki'im Israel, but your name will be Israel. Why? Ki sarita im Elohim, because you have struggled with, you have fought with God, Elohim, or with great, some people translate it as great beings, divine beings, ve'im anashim, and with people, vatuchal, and you've succeeded, and you prevailed. So think about that. Finally, he started fighting. He's finally defeated Lavan. After all these years of running away, he's defeated Lavan, he's defeated this angel, and now this angel, perhaps this person is telling him, you're not Yaakov anymore, Now you're the fighter. You're the one who's fighting with great beings and able to, vatuchal, now you can prevail. Now you're Israel. Okay, so he is the one, the fighter now. He has realized his potential. He has proven that he can be an Esau, that he's not just running away. He can be a great warrior. He's not just a yeshiva student who can sit and learn all day and pray and meditate. He's also a fighter. He's also IDF. Yeah. This is really where we get to the whole idea of what it means to be Israel, because this is where the name is defined. This is where the name comes from. Israel really means kisarita im Elohim, that you fought with God or fought alongside God, but you are a fighter. That's what Israel means. It's being this holy warrior. Israel literally means like warrior for God. Sarita im Elohim. Israel means God's warrior. Okay? So there's a few meanings. There's also Sar El, which is like a prince of God. There's also, if you split it in half, it's just Yashar El, that you're straight to God. Because Israel, we know, we pray directly to God. We're not allowed to have no intermediaries. We don't pray to angels, not to saints, not to anybody. Just God. We have a straight, direct relationship to God. Yashar El. Also Shir El, that it's an anagram of God's song. Because the whole Torah is a song, and we're always singing our psalms and Torah and prayers and so on to God. So there's many meanings of the word. And also, and most importantly here, remember, his name was Yaakov. What does Yaakov mean? The heel. The heel is the lowest part of the body. It's at the very bottom. And what is Israel? Israel is literally an anagram of Li Rosh. Literally, like God is saying, now he is my head. Now he went from being on the akev, from the heel, to the Rosh. So Israel is also Li Rosh, that he has now become a head, from the heel to the head. So he's done this complete transformation into being this fighter. He's not a pushover anymore, and he is the person he's supposed to be. He's both Yaakov and Esau in one, which is what we want. And that's what the Jewish people are supposed to be. That's what Israel is supposed to be. That's what God wants from us. Yes, you are an Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. You have to be innocent, pure, righteous, learning, always connected to Torah and mitzvot and prayers. But you also have to be Israel. You also have to be the fighter. You also have to be a warrior. You can't be weak. You can't be a pushover. You can't let people pick on you. And for all these centuries, Jews have kind of been weak on this regard. They've allowed other nations to stomp on them and persecute them and exile them. And enough is enough. And that's where the Zionist movement really came in and said, enough, right? Enough is, let's reclaim who we really are, which is Israel. We're not just Beit Yaakov. We're also Bnei Israel. We have to be God's fighters. That's what. And when the Zionists, specifically when Israel was formed in 1948, there was a big question of what are we going to call this country? And they debated this. The first cabinet debated this. So what are we going to call it? And the first suggestion was, well, we call it Zion because we're Zionists. It's the Zionist movement. So it should be the state of Zion. That should be, Eretz Tzion. It's in the Hatikva, and it's like the first proposal was to call the new country Zion. They said, no, but that doesn't really capture who we are. And there were others. Some people suggested Tzabar, the state of Tzabar, because the Sabra was, the Tzabar, the prickly pear, was like a symbol of the new Israeli, whatever, not Israeli, but these new settlers in Israel, whatever, these Jews that have come back. So because they were being represented by the Tzabar, by the Sabra, the prickly, some people wanted to call it the state of Sabra, whatever. Some people thought just call it Judea, right? It's the land of the Jews, it's the Jewish state, so call it Judea. That's what it was known as 2,000 years ago in Roman time, up until Roman times, when before the Romans renamed it to Palestina, it was always called Judea. So let's call it Judea. But ultimately they went with Israel, which is perfect, because that's exactly what it's supposed to be. This is a place where you have those two qualities in one. A lot of scholarship, a lot of wisdom. We know Israel's been amazing when it comes to technology, education, medicine, always inventing things, tons of Nobel Prizes per capita, punches way above its small size. It's also a place of Torah learning. It's also a place of Beit Yaakov, right? It's supposed to be a godly place, a spiritual place. It's supposed to be. That's what Israel is meant to be. It's supposed to have both qualities. Right, so we're supposed to be scholars, we're supposed to be warriors, we're supposed to be Yaakov, and we're supposed to have that Esau quality of Israel. And that's embodied by King David. Right? Like the ultimate Jewish person is King David. And in fact, the flag of Israel is the Magen David, right? Is the Star of David. And that's also not a coincidence, right? Everything is from heaven. It's all divine. So it's Dafka the Magen David that's on the flag of Israel because King David was the perfect embodiment of being Yaakov and Esau in one. In fact, Kabbalistically, it's said explicitly that David contained the souls of Yaakov and Esau. He was their reincarnation, 2 in 1, which is why
He was also read.
the only other person in the whole Tanakh that's described as Admoni is King David. Only 2 people in the whole Tanakh are called Admoni. Esau is called Admoni, and King David is called Admoni. How is that possible? In fact, the commentaries say that when Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel, went to anoint, that God told him, go to the house of Ishai, to the house of Jesse, and anoint David as the next king, anoint the next king of Israel. When he came there and Shmuel first saw David, he saw that he was Admoni, and Shmuel said, this is Esau. That's what he said. That's what the commentaries say. That Shmuel saw Esau when he looked at David. And then he saw his eyes, and he said, no, his eyes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. He said, no, his eyes are not. The eyes are Yaakov, but he's Admoni, he's Esau. And King David was like Esau. He was this incredible warrior. And there's so many parallels in their lives between King David and Esau, even the size of their military. We know Esau had 400 troops, and the first time that King David's army is numbered is 400. Also, there's so much of their life details that they have in common. And King David was this great warrior who fought Goliath, who was not afraid to fight. All the Israelites were afraid to fight Goliath. And he was this kid, this shepherd kid, who said, what are you guys afraid of? What's the big deal? And he went and he defeated him very quickly. So he was this incredible warrior that was not afraid to fight. And he was also a scholar. He wrote Tehillim. Could there be anything more powerful than Tehillim, right? He wrote the book of Tehillim, the most thing that all Jews read constantly all the time. So he was this great musician. He was praying. He's singing. He's always with God. He has faith. He says he's going to strike down his enemies with God's strength. So he's the perfect embodiment of Israel, which is why he merited to create the first real kingdom of Israel. He is the creator of the kingdom of Israel. He unified all the tribes, and he took Jerusalem and established it as the capital. Since then, for 3,000 years, Jerusalem is our capital because of King David. He's the one that did it. Right? Before that, when he started his kingship, the capital was Hebron. For the first 7 years, he ruled in Hebron. And then, for the last 33 years, he was in Jerusalem. Okay, so that's King David. Going back to finish off the Yaakov story, and then we're done. Yaakov says he wants to know who he battled. V'yishal Yaakov v'yomer hagida na shmecha. Yaakov says, who did I just fight? What's your name? Right? Going back to the brawl, who we assume is an angel. And the person, that being, says, v'yomer lama ze tishal lishmi. Why are you asking my name? Right? Like, you don't need to know my name. And then he runs away. It says he ran away and he wouldn't say his name. And Yaakov says, Vayikra Yaakov shema makom Pniel. And Yaakov called that place Pniel. Why? Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim. Because I saw God face to face. It's like I saw God's face. V'tinatzel nafshi. So from that we assume that he fought an angel. It doesn't say here that he fought an angel. It says he fought a man. The man didn't want to give him his name. He didn't want to be identified because he said, the sun is rising, I have to get out of here so that he doesn't know who I am.
That's one clue.
Right?
And then it gives him another name, is another clue.
So let's see. So what's going on here? Yaakov is saying, it's like I saw the face of God, called it Pniel. So that's why we assume it's an angel. There's only one other place, and that's actually, we read it in the Haftarah from the book of Hosea. And Hosea does tell us that this person was an angel, because it says there, Vayisar el malach, so he fought with an angel, Vayuchal, and he was able to defeat him. So here in the Haftarah,
man/angel did say to him,
Skisarita im Elohim. That's right. So you fought with divine beings.
I am divine. No?
Yeah, could be. Could be. Yeah. Could be. Right. Could be that this is what he meant. And Yaakov said, I saw Elohim panim el panim. It's like I saw God face to face. Remember also that the word Elohim sometimes means great people, great powers, judges. Sometimes it's translated as judges. So the Haftarah for this week's parsha does seem to suggest that it's an angel. But I want to suggest that there is another way of reading this whole story. By the way, the Haftarah also confirms this idea that when he's running away, he's Yaakov. But when he's fighting, he's Israel. Because the Haftarah ends by saying, Vayivrach Yaakov sde Aram, that Yaakov ran away, right? He fled to Aram, but then, Vayavod Israel be'isha u'be'isha shamar. But then he became Israel when he was working, when he was guarding, when he was Vayavod and Shamar, he's called Israel. So when he ran away, Vayivrach Yaakov, like running away on your heels. The heel is also associated with retreating, fleeing. But when he was working and when he was guarding, Vayavod and Shamar, he's Israel. Right? So again, the Haftarah also reinforces that notion. Now, the traditional way is to say that it is an angel. But I think there's another beautiful way of looking at it, which I've heard various people suggest in the past, and I think this is great. I didn't come up with this, but I think it's beautiful. So it says like this. He says that I saw God, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he fought an angel. It just means that God helped him in the battle. And the Torah says that he's an ish, that it was a man that fought with him. So who would that man be? Well, the very next morning, the very next sentence is that this person runs away, and Yaakov sees who? Esau. He sees Esau coming his way, and as he's talking to Esau, listen to what he tells him. Vayomer Yaakov tells him, Al na imna matzati chen be'enecha velakachta minchati meyadi. Take my gifts. Yaakov wanted to give him a present. Why? Ki al ken ra'iti panecha, because I see your face. Kirot pnei Elohim. It's like seeing the face of God. Yaakov tells Esau, please take my gift, because seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. Isn't that what he just said a few verses earlier? So who did he really fight? The Torah says he fought an ish. Why did that person that he fight not want to know who he was? He didn't want to say his name. He didn't want the sunrise to come up. He didn't want to know who he was. If it was an angel, so what's the big deal? What, angels can't be there during the day? Angels came to Avram. The 3 angels came to Avram during the day. So what's wrong with an angel? You know what I mean? So it doesn't seem like it was necessarily an angel. This was a mystery figure who didn't want to be known. He said, the sun's coming up, I got to get out of here. You can't know my name, and he just runs away.
So he could have beat him yesterday, he brought 400 people.
Exactly. So there is this beautiful suggestion that it was actually Esau that he fought. Meaning, they were preparing their 2 armies. Esau is coming with his army. Yaakov is coming with his army. And you know what? They just settle it alone, man to man, at night. They meet up, and let's just do this. Without getting everybody involved.
So you're saying that they start blessing with the name?
So listen, let me finish. So no, it makes perfect sense. And listen, I guarantee you, give me 2 minutes and you're going to agree with me. Because he fights with Esau one-on-one. He proves that yes, I can be Esau. Esau wants to test him too. He says, hey, this guy stole my birthright, stole my blessing. He wants to be me. Can he be me? Can he beat me? And they fought, and Yaakov wins. And Esau says, who are you? You're not Yaakov, right? He asks, who are you? He says, I'm Yaakov. He says, you're not Yaakov. He says, you're Israel, because you're fighting now. You're not the Yaakov that I used to know. This is somebody else. You're somebody else. Esau gives him a new name. Esau says, yes. You know what? Esau confirms finally and says, before I was mad at you. I wanted to kill you because I thought you stole it. But now I see you deserve it. And he gives him the name Israel. And so the very next morning, they embrace. He hugs him. He kisses him. He says, you're my brother. Come live with me. We're going to do this together. And this is the proof. What's the proof here? Remember, before, when Yaakov stole his blessing, he said, is it because his name is Yaakov that he's outwitted me these 2 times? And now he's saying, what's your name, Yaakov? No, you're not Yaakov. You're Israel. But here's the proof. The proof is, we tend to think that here, this angel, because when we think that it's an angel, we think that here the angel renamed him Israel. But it didn't. Because look what happens right after. After all of this happens, Yaakov is leaving. Yaakov is not with Esau anymore. He's going to Israel. He's doing his thing. And the Torah says this, listen. Vayera Elohim el Yaakov. Now God appears to Yaakov, bevo mi padan Aram, when he came from Aram. So God comes back to him again, to another vision. When he comes back to Israel, God appeared to him when he went to Haran, to Aram, to Aramea. Now he comes back, and so again, Vayera Elohim el Yaakov od, once more, once he came back to Israel, Vayivarech oto, and blessed him. Vayomer lo Elohim, and God tells him, listen to this, Shimcha Yaakov, lo ikra Shimcha od Yaakov. Your name will no longer be Yaakov. Ki im Israel yeshmecha. Wait, what? What do you mean? Didn't you already get the name change? No. Now God comes to him and says, your name is Israel. Before, that wasn't God. That wasn't an angel. See what I mean? Now, God comes to him and now it's clear. Now it's official. God says, hey, remember that whoever that was that said your name should be Israel? It's approved. That's your name. Right? You're not Yaakov anymore. So if you read it the other way, the traditional way of reading it, which is that he fought an angel, this is redundant. This is pointless. Why say this again? Right? If that was an angel that renamed him, why do I need this? Now it's clear. Back then it was an Ish. Now it's God coming to him and saying, you're not Yaakov, you're Israel now. And God blesses him and the whole circle comes together. So anyway, that's the suggestion. You can take it. You don't have to accept it. You can go with the, So I think it's a little more poetic that way, that he proves that he can be Esau. He defeats Esau and he gets Esau's own blessing. Esau himself confirms that, you know what, you deserve it. You keep the birthright and the blessing because you are capable. You're Israel. Let's just finish. I think there is a way to combine the two opinions. So you kind of we don't want to deny the whole idea that it was an angel. And Hosea says it was a malach. Although the truth is malach can also mean a messenger. It doesn't have to mean literally an angel. Because Parashat Vayishlach malachim, he didn't send angels. He sent messengers, right? Yeah. So even when Hosea says that he fought a malach, malach often doesn't mean an angel. It often just means a messenger. So it's not necessarily that it has to be an angel. But anyway, we don't want to necessarily deny the tradition that he fought with an angel. So I think there is a way to blend it. And the way that it's often described is that he fought Esau's guardian angel. Okay, so that kind of combines both. That he fought Esau, but not like Esau directly. He fought Esau's guardian angel, who would resemble Esau, who would have some free will, because angels are also given a limited amount of free will. So Esau's guardian angel would have been able to fight Yaakov, and so that kind of combines both opinions. That God would still have to come after and confirm that his name is Israel, because at that point it was just Esau's guardian angel that was doing it. You see what I mean? So that's one way of actually blending both opinions to say that he fought with Esau's guardian angel. Okay, and finally, the last point I want to make, and then we're done, is that even though we see here that both the angel person, whoever it was, and God said, you shall no longer be Yaakov, you shall be Israel, that's not what we see though. Because as the Torah continues, he is called Yaakov still. With Avraham, he was Avram, and then he became Avraham, and then he's always Avraham. He's never Avram again. When Sarai became Sarah, she's never Sarai again. Right? The name change is permanent. But with this one, it's strange, because he's told that he will no longer be Yaakov. He needs to be Israel, and yet the Torah keeps vacillating between calling him Yaakov and Israel, very strangely.
Sometimes you have to fight, sometimes you have to talk.
True, and if you actually look at it, if you pay attention as you read the parshas going forward, you often find that when he's being, again, perhaps the scholar, perhaps more softer, weaker, he's being Yaakov. But when he's being more prophetic, when he's being on a higher level, when he's being stronger, he's Israel. So there is that distinction. So what we find is that he's actually vacillating between these two personalities. He's not always Israel like he should be. God said you should no longer be Yaakov. You should be Israel. You should be that perfect balance, that 2 in 1. But sometimes he still, prefers to be just Yaakov, Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, the simple, innocent man sitting in tents. And I think that's important to point that out. Because for us as a nation, as the people of Israel, as the children of Israel, since then, for thousands of years, we're kind of vacillating as well between the two. We're not always living up to being Israel. Sometimes we're just choosing the easy approach, which is let's just be Yoshev Ohalim, let's just do our own thing, let's just learn and just bubble ourselves off from the world, and let's just be Yaakov, let's just be Beit Yaakov. And I think it's important for us not to be just Yaakov, but always live up to what God said. You should always be Israel. Don't forget that you also have to be a warrior. You also have to confront evil. I want to end with that message that, especially with what's going on in the world today, that we shouldn't have fear. We shouldn't be fleeing. We shouldn't be running away. We shouldn't be afraid. we should definitely embody Yaakov in the sense of being tam, yoshev ohalim, connecting to Torah, prayer, study, mitzvot, all of that. But also we have to be Israel, ki sarita im Elohim, im anashim. You have to fight people, you have to fight great beings, you have to fight alongside God. We have to be divine, holy warriors and live up to our name, which is Israel. And hopefully we can realize that today and always. So we'll end with that.
What you're saying is so important and so deep and misunderstanding. How come the yeshiva people that are studying Torah every day, all their lives,
Because they haven't heard this shiur yet. Right. Now they're going to hear this. Now, so, no, I agree with you. But that's been the mentality after centuries of subjugation.
Do you think that we should have the mistake of the diaspora the last 1,000, 2,000 years was that we just stayed in our ghettos? We should have gotten out.
Absolutely. You know, it reminds me of a famous story. You know, they say on Tisha B'Av, there's this famous story that they say that Napoleon, one Tisha B'Av, Napoleon walked by a synagogue in wherever, in Paris or in Vilna. There's various versions of the story. And Napoleon, this is the story how it's told typically in Jewish Orthodox circles, that Napoleon walked by a shul on Tisha B'Av and heard the Jews crying, and he said, why are the Jews crying? And then somebody told him, they're mourning over the temple that was destroyed, 2,000 years ago. And supposedly he said, a people that still mourns over a temple, 2,000 years later, is a people that will merit to see their temple again, or something like that. That's how the story is usually told, and it's complete nonsense because that's not actually how the original story as it first appears, the earliest version of the story is, first of all, the story sounds ridiculous because Napoleon was not an ignoramus. He obviously knew that the temple was destroyed. That's also an important part of Christian belief and whatever. That was the time of Jesus and all that. So there's no way that Napoleon didn't know about the temple's destruction and about Jews and Tisha B'Av. So first, that's number one. Napoleon was a very smart man. So the story already sounds fake. The real story, as it first appeared, even this could be a fake story. It's a legend, but the original way that this legend, in the earliest source that describes it, is Napoleon walked by a shul, heard the Jews mourning on Tisha B'Av, and said, why are they crying for something that happened 2,000 years ago if they want to see their temple? And he took out his sword. He says, this is how you get your temple. That's the story. And that makes a lot more sense because Napoleon was this great general. He's not going to say, yeah, guys, keep crying until you get the temple again. That's completely not something Napoleon would have ever said, right? Napoleon definitely didn't have that hashkafa. He would have said, why are you guys crying? Organize yourselves, get some weapons, go and build your temple, get your land and build your temple. That's what Napoleon would have said. So, yes, Jews should have a long time ago organized and taken back their land, right? And the fact that we did it in the last century is a good thing.
Take the middle path, though. Not just Becherev.
Of course. That's what I'm saying. We have to be Israel. We have to be like King David. And that's why Mashiach, when we think about Mashiach, who is Mashiach? We say he's Mashiach ben David, right? Mashiach is this return of King David. We always say, David Melech Israel Chai V'Kayam, that King David is still alive. What does that mean? King David died 3,000 years ago. So we're not talking about King David. We're talking about Mashiach ben David. Because who is Mashiach? It's the person who can embody this exact quality. A person who can be both Yaakov and Esau. Right? That's fundamental. So people are often looking for Mashiach who's just a Yaakov, who's an Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, who's giving nice shiurim and he's very spiritual and he gives good blessings and he's a miracle worker and that's wonderful. But that's not what Mashiach is. That's not who King David was. That's not who Israel was. Right? Mashiach is a fighter. Isaiah says, Mi ze bami Edom, who is coming? Mashiach coming from Edom with bloodied garments. Right? He's describing him as a warrior, as a fighter. Even Mashiach is an embodiment of King David. And when you want that person, he's definitely, like Mike is saying, this Hesder Yeshiva guy who is part of the IDF, who's like a Golani guy, and who's also a big Torah guy, and a big tzaddik, is both. That's who he's supposed to be. So that's what we're waiting for, what we're looking for is a person like that, who can live up to the ideal of being like a modern day King David.